So good afternoon, my name's Alister Chapman, and in the next half an hour I'm going to be looking at the relevance of small, large sensor cameras within the industry that we work in, and that will go from everything from corporate video all the way up to feature filmmaking. Now, before you all get too comfortable, I am going to be showing some side-by-side comparisons of various cameras on this screen. This is not the largest of screens. If you do want to move forwards and find somewhere a bit closer to this screen so you can have a look at those comparisons, please feel free to do so. There are some spare seats towards the front. So, also, if you want to ask any questions, because I wouldn't be able to hear you from here because of the background noise, if you go to slido.com, S-L-I-D-O, slido.com, and you enter MPTS 2026 as the passcode as a guest, you'll be able to go to the production studio area and you can ask questions using the online system. I will remind you of that address a couple of times during the presentation. So let's get into this. So this is, in my view now, what we're coming into is the age of the small camera. And what do I mean by that? I mean, we're at a period now where, certainly if I go back to where I started in this business, cameras were this big, they went on your shoulder, they were huge, heavy, bulky, very impressive looking, and if you wanted good image quality, you had to have these great big cameras. It was only these big cameras that delivered the image quality. But now, we can get incredible image quality from very, very small cameras, going all the way down to something like a phone. You know, this phone, the camera on this is actually very, very good, and it can produce really good images. And we're at a really interesting place now because the difference between what a large camera can produce and what a small camera can produce is much, much smaller than we've ever had at any other time in history. So then you have to start thinking about it. You have to ask that question yourself. Why on earth would you spend £75,000, £100,000 on a camera like an Arri 35, a Venice, whatever your preference is, when potentially you could shoot your next project on a £3,000 to £5,000 camera and the audience would never know the difference? So why do we need these big cameras if you can shoot a movie with a 5K camera? So I'm going to just show you a few images. I'm not going to dwell a lot on these because on this size of screen it's going to be a little bit difficult to actually tell. But one of these is a very expensive camera, £75,000 camera, and the other is a £5,000 camera. And to be honest, this far away I wouldn't actually expect you to see a difference. But even, this is part of a workshop that I did, a full-day workshop where we had an Arri 35, an Arri LF, we had a Sony Venice 2, we had a Burano, I had an FX3 and a Sony A1 and a Red Weapon, all side by side. And on the day, live on the screen, people couldn't tell which was which the majority of the time. There are a few tells in some of the shots where you might identify a camera, but broadly speaking, they all look the same. And if you can't tell, as a seasoned filmmaker, how is your audience going to tell? The answer is they're not. So you can go now, that's the end of the presentation, because no, there's more to it than that. So how about these two? One of those is a Sony A1, which is a little mirrorless photo type camera, and the other is an Arri LF. This screen isn't the best to be viewing this on. But I wouldn't expect you to actually see the difference because on the day, with the real footage, we really, really struggled to see those differences. So FX3 and Venice 2, again, none of these look different. And what we did to try and level the game with this is we took the very best codec that each of these cameras had, and we used a workflow called ACES, the Academy Color Encoding System, to grade the footage. And the great thing about doing that is ACES tries to remove any manufacturer look. So ACES, they have tables within that software that refers back to what the sensor captured and how that relates to what the light in the scene would have been. So the idea behind ACES is every camera looks exactly the same, so that when you do your grading and your post-production, every camera grades in exactly the same way. And the benefit of that when you're doing camera tests is you are removing the manufacturer's creative look that they might have put into that camera, and you're going back to the raw data and what did the scene actually look like. And it gets really interesting when you start comparing multiple cameras, because they all start looking the same, which is actually what ACES is supposed to do. You're getting rid of the manufacturer look. So in this case, that's the Arri LF on the right, on the left, and the Sony A1 on the right. And what about if we zoom into the image? So now the image is zoomed in something like 400%, 4 times, and can you tell the difference? Now they do look very slightly different. I will give you that these two images are not identical, but can you tell which camera they are? And the answer is you can't. You certainly won't if you're any distance away from the screen. So one is the Arri LF and the other is the A1. We just can't see these differences, because where we are now with sensor technology, we're at a point where they are all so good that they are all producing exceptionally good images, so the differences that do exist are minute, even between a 5K camera and a 75K camera. Now the arguments that normally I hear when I start discussing this with people is, well, yeah, but a small camera doesn't have the dynamic range, the colors won't be as good, the codec isn't going to be good enough, and the image is going to fall apart when I grade it. Actually, that's nonsense. None of those ever turn out to be true. Dynamic range. How much dynamic range do we need? You know, especially if you're doing drama and things like that where you control the light. Almost every single camera on the market now will give you 14 stops of dynamic range. We're beyond the point where dynamic range is a major issue. There are differences, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that there aren't differences, but it's not something to really panic about or worry about. And the colors. There's no reason why a cheap camera like this can't produce as good a color as a high-end camera, frankly. A lot of them are using the same or very similar sensors with the same color filters, the same color pipelines very often. So there's no reason really for them to look different. Oh, and I forgot the other one. The codec won't be good enough. That's a really important one. Everyone tells me, oh, the codec, it'll never hold up to post-production in this small camera, it's too compressed, it'll look like rubbish, and the image is going to fall apart when I grade it. As you'll see in the presentation, the reality is very different to that. And there's a lot of misunderstanding about differences between a compressed recording that might be using log and raw. In terms of dynamic range, how much do you actually need? So this is shot, these images are shot with a variety of cameras. There's a Venice 2 in there, there's a couple of Venice 2, there's a Fujifilm camera, the GFX, and there's a Sony FX3 in there. These shots are really challenging. This is a really bright sky against a dark background. This is heavily backlit. This was deliberately backlit to really show off the performance of the camera. This again is very heavily backlit, deliberately. None of the cameras fell apart. That's Venice 1 up there actually. That's an FX3, that's the Fujifilm camera, and that's a Venice 2. All of them were fine. Tricks you can use if you do struggle with dynamic range, a little bit of soft diffusion, something like that, bleeds the highlights into the shadows, softens the edges of your highlights, makes a tremendous difference to any camera in the way it handles highlights and high dynamic range. And the colors, what about the colors? Is there a problem with the colors in any of these shots? We have amazing sunsets in Norway, that's an FX3. Circus performances, that is a Sony A1, those two are Sony A1, and this one here, which is very bright colored lights, this monitor isn't great, is FX3 again. Whether I shoot with a Venice FX3 A1, I never have a problem with not enough color or the wrong colors or weird colors anymore. Those problems we used to have 10 years ago, but we don't have them anymore. Now this is an interesting image. So this is actually looking at chroma and color resolution. How much color is a camera able to preserve that you can take into post-production? So what I've done is I've taken a very narrow range of hues and made them that pinky purple color, and everything else is the same. And what we see in these two images, the one on the left, if you look in the top corner just under the headband, is very blocky. And that's indicating a lack of chroma resolution and chroma noise. The image on the right here, these blocks are much, much finer. They blend more into the remaining skin tones, and that shows us higher chroma resolution and less chroma blockiness and less chroma noise. Now, if I told you that one of these cameras was shooting in uncompressed RAW and the other is shooting with H.265, which one do you think is which? You're probably going to... Oh, go back. You probably get it wrong, because actually that is a Sony A1 H.265 500 megabit per second codec. That is an ARRI 35 shooting uncompressed RAW. And the reason that the A1 does better in this particular example is an 8K sensor. You have twice as many samples, you have twice as much color information. That codec isn't making as much difference as you would expect, because what we're starting out with actually has more detail, more texture, more information. So you need to think about this stuff. And I'm not saying this, please don't get me wrong, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the Alexa 35. I'm just showing that we have a lot of preconceived ideas about the differences that we expect to see from these cameras, and confirmation bias is a big problem. You go and you shoot with a big camera and it's like, well, it must be better because it's a big expensive camera. You shoot with a little teeny tiny camera, oh, it can't be any good, it's too small. But we don't do the testing, we don't actually analyze what we're doing and what we're working with. The F1 movie is a really great example of this. So in the F1 movie, who's seen the F1 movie? Yeah, most of you have seen it, or a lot of you have seen it. They use a mix of different cameras. The principal camera, Sony Venice 2, 8K sensor, very well accepted cinema camera, big old camera like that. But within the film, on the cars, which makes up a very large portion of the film, they've used everything from iPhones to a camera that's based on the Sony FR7, which is a bit like the FX6 and FX3, using a very highly compressed codec. But you don't notice that in the film. You don't notice that you're going from this 75,000, £100,000 camera to a £5,000 camera, or even an iPhone within the film, because it's been well handled. They've thought about how they're going to do it, how they approach it, and it works really well. Let's have a look at an example. So
some people look at Sonny Hayes. They see a guy who lives in a van, a gambling junkie who missed his shot, the best that never was. But I see possibility. My rook is a phenomenal talent, but he's young. You plus him, boom, I got a team.
When was the last time you won a race?
Sunday, Daytona.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Formula One.
Oh, I'm sorry. Then same as you.
There's this new guy. He's old. He's such a prick. He's quick though.
If you had any constructive criticism for each other, what would it be?
Don't be such an ass kid. That was constructive.
Wow.
Did you win something? There's 20 other drivers still out on that track. Do you think any of them respect us?
They're saying Sonny Hayes isn't a has-been. He's a never was.
If the last thing I do is drive that car, I will take that life, man. 1,000 times.
I'm offering you an open seat in Formula One. The only place you could say, if you win, you are the absolute best in the world.
Okay, so I've talked about this already. So you know which cameras were used to shoot the main part of the film, and you know which were used. So you know that the shots that are in the cars, on the cars, around the cars are generally shot with a much smaller, much cheaper camera. But you can't tell watching the film. If you didn't know that, if you were our audience out there, they wouldn't realize that there were totally different cameras used to shoot different parts of that movie. They might figure it out that, okay, he's not going to put this great big camera on a racing car, but in general, the audience won't have noticed or seen any difference in the perceived image quality between the stuff shot in the car and the stuff that's not. And I've got a little behind the scenes clip here.
I think audiences are going to get a perspective of what it's like to be in one of these machines. I mean, it's just enough room for the driver.
Now we have 16 different angles on the car. It's the first time we've ever had a remote camera that can turn and move.
I mean, if you look at this camera body, that's 4K. This is like cutting edge. This one moves 360.
So what's really, I'm going to skip through that because otherwise I'll just end up watching too many videos. What's really interesting though, I think, is that what this allows us as filmmakers to do is to start to be more creative again. When you're not tied to a big bulky camera, you can start doing much more interesting shots. So these cameras that are in the car, they're based on a Sony camera called the FR7, which they've got on the booth over there, which is a remote pan and tilt camera, uses exactly the same sensor, and this is actually based on the FX6. And they shrunk it down. They threw a load of stuff that they didn't need, like the motors in this and the housing. They shriveled it down to create this camera that went on the cars. And basically, you're using that same sensor as an FX3 or FX6 has, recording to XAVC, it's a highly compressed codec, to get these shots that are used in this massive budget feature film. And it looks great. There is nothing at all wrong with it. And that excites me as a filmmaker, because this is actually, if you're creative enough, yeah, we're not all going to be building one of these, but an FX3 is very small, is you can put these cameras into really interesting places and get shots and get footage that does not look different to everything else. So then suddenly it's like, well, okay, I'm going to stick with my big main camera to shoot the bulk of the film, but now I can start doing some really interesting stuff with small cranes, small jibs, putting on little remote controlled cars, doing really exciting stuff. So here's a film I had a tiny part in. I did shoot a little bit of this film, but I also, because I had some involvement in it, know what was done in here. So I'm just going to show you another little clip. So we've got, you've probably figured it out by now, but which cameras were used to shoot which shots? With Venice 2 again and the FX3. So the FX3 was used to shoot all the shots around the bicycle. Not just the camera that's mounted onto the bicycle, but all the tracking shots were done with an FX3. because they wanted to get the camera really, really close to the bicycle. And obviously a cyclist is rather vulnerable. So you don't want a great big tracking vehicle with a huge crane swinging a big camera around in front of a bicycle, because if you hit her with that bike, that's a big problem. So they used an FX3.
More than one generation
I'm going to skip through this. That bit. They used an FX3 on a bicycle with a gimbal on it. You can see it in that bottom left corner. It allowed them to follow the bike following bike, two bicycles, same speed, much easier than trying to use a tracking vehicle. And it allowed them to get these really tight, really close-up shots, but you wouldn't know. You watch the movie on a great big cinema screen, you absolutely wouldn't know. So what's changed? Why have we got to this place? The big thing is now that our sensors have got so much better. And a lot of the sensors that are going in these small cameras are incredibly closely related to the sensors going in the big camera. And we have new processes with sensors now where they've moved a lot of the electronics on a sensor away from the light gathering area to another layer on the sensor. We have to talk about multi-layer sensors and stacked sensors. So the sensors now have more dynamic range, they have less noise, and all of these things. So they all perform well, even the cheap ones. Sony's Burano and Sony's A1, they share the same sensor. Sony Venice has a sensor that is extremely closely related to that. I actually suspect that the top layer, the pixels, are the same on both. So it's no surprise that all of these cameras look the same. So really, there's no reason why we can't mix and match these cameras. And more advanced post-production workflows now allow us to extract every last bit of information out of those cameras. The difference now between shooting with log and raw is actually tiny. And generally in post-production, when you start grading, the thing that limits what you can do isn't whether you shot with raw or whether you shot with log with a compressed codec. It's how noisy the picture is. Because a very noisy image, or the noise in even a well-shot image, is what will limit how far you can push that footage in post-production, not your choice of codec. And I would suggest people try that. And we know this because actually Top Gun Maverick. Who's seen Top Gun Maverick? We probably know that the in-cockpit footage from that camera was shot using a Sony Venice camera, and some of them with the Rialto, where they separate the camera head. But what most people don't realize is that the old Venice 1 was about that long with the RAW recorder on it. There wasn't enough room for the RAW recorder, so it was all shot with XAVC. It wasn't using the RAW. They used XAVC to shoot huge chunks of Top Gun. And it looks fine and nobody realizes. And if even us as experts aren't noticing this stuff, our audience will never, ever notice it. Lenses play a big thing. I'm going to have to dash through because I'm running out of time. So why don't we use a small camera for everything? There are reasons. Sometimes you've got a load of extra things like lens mounts might not be so secure. You've got to find space for locket boxes, audio recorders, and all sorts of other things. So sometimes you do need a physically bigger camera. But none of this bothered Gareth Edwards, and he actually shot the film The Creator entirely on an FX3. Well, not entirely, there's an FX9 in there as well. So the long and the short of it is that we've reached this point with camera technology has got so good that we can shoot anything, including a feature film, with a small compact camera that costs £5,000. The audience, they never get to see the side-by-side tests that we do. So they never see these tiny, tiny details that we might see when you are able to compare side-by-side shots. So they're never going to see these differences. If we struggle to see these differences, reality is that they become irrelevant. So as filmmakers, as people interested in this technology, it's a great time to go out there and make films, because there is no excuse now for you not producing a beautiful film, even with a £5,000-6,000 camera, because they're all capable of producing amazing results. So I'm just going to see if there's any questions, and then I do believe I'm out. Oh no, I've got 5 minutes left. I've got 5 minutes left. My counter went down to 0 and now I have 5 minutes left. Okay, I will continue, because none of this did bother Gareth Edwards. And we'll just show a few examples from the film The Creator quickly.
When the war started, they protected me.
Took better care of me than humans would have.
They're not people, Maya. It's just programming.
10 years ago today, the artificial intelligence created to protect us detonated a nuclear warhead in Los Angeles. This is a fight for our very existence.
Sergeant Taylor, we are this close to winning the war. But the AI are developing a super weapon.
Okay, I'll skip through that a little bit. But yes, there is a lot of CGI.
My favourite cinema is very visually driven. It's not like a play. It's like
and you can see the
dream.
camera.
It's just a pure emotion. This film's a melting pot of movies I grew up loving. A Vietnam movie mixed with robotic.
So I've got pictures of the camera. So this is the camera rig that they used. It's an FX3 on a gimbal, on a Ronin gimbal, and the entire 99% of the film was shot this way. And the reason they did it was this small portable camera allowed them to travel around Southeast Asia to multiple locations, and it significantly reduced the cost of the crew, the flights, and everything else. A much smaller crew, much less kit to move. Your gimbals, your jibs, everything becomes smaller, lighter, and that allows you to be much more flexible with your shooting to really get to interesting places. And also now we have incredible sensitivity with these cameras, so they could shoot at night without needing enormous lighting setups and lighting rigs. And that's why they did it. It wasn't a marketing gimmick. It wasn't anything like that. They really used the fact that you can create amazing images from these small cameras. So it really does allow you to be more creative. Now, I did get a question in here. It was actually quite a good question. So I talked about noise being a limiting factor in post-production grading. That wouldn't stop me from using a small camera, because the small cameras are no more noisy than the big cameras. You're essentially always using the same size of sensor nowadays. Mostly it's going to be a full-frame sensor, similar amount of pixels, similar sensitivity, similar noise. So it's going to be about how you expose it and how you use that camera. And if you've got a decent exposure, you won't have excessive noise, and you'll be able to push it hard in post-production. If you don't expose well, then you'll have noise, then you'll have a problem in post-production. But that would apply equally to your big £75,000 Venice 2 or Arri LF or whatever you've chosen to shoot on, that if you haven't exposed it well, you're going to struggle to grade it. So it's not about the camera, it's about you and how you use it. And getting the very best image, the best exposure, the right exposure. The cost of the camera isn't what limits you now. It is how you use that camera and how you make the most of it. I do still use big cameras. I still shoot a lot on Venice 2. I'm not saying that there is no difference between a Venice 2 and an A1 or an FX3. That would be a lie. There are differences. And when you're shooting on a large production where maybe the budget for a day's shoot is £20,000, the cost of the camera is largely irrelevant. So you pick the best that you can. Why would you not use a Venice 2 if the budget is there and it is the appropriate camera for that particular thing? So it is about considering what is the right tool for the job. And I wouldn't always shoot everything with an FX3 because it's a great little camera, but sometimes it's too small, too fiddly for certain things. But in terms of the image quality, in terms of what these cameras can deliver now, the difference between those images is so immensely small that when we test them, we struggle to see those differences. Our audiences never do those tests. They never see that. They see a film in isolation, and I'm quite sure that the majority of people that went to see The Creator in the cinemas, and that was actually released on IMAX, would never have realized it was shot with a camera that's that big and that you could buy in a high street store for about, well, they're about £4,000 now, something like that. They wouldn't have known, and they wouldn't have cared. All they care about is the story good? Does it look nice? Did I enjoy myself in that film? That's all they want from what they go and see. So it's worth thinking about where we are right now with these small cameras. They're amazing tools, and I think we're really lucky to have them right now. So I'm being told I have to stop. A big sign back there says stop. So I'm going to stop so the next presenter can get ready. Thank you for listening. Thank you for coming.